There was a spark, there was a light, there was a splendor in the darkness of the night. There was a sigh, there was a breeze that moved with gentle apprehension through the trees. But as the dew, covered the ground, there was no ear to hear the sound. Ha 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 And there was wisdom behind the hand that formed some dust into the likeness of a man, and into this the breath of life, so that the figure made from dust would see the light. Would see the light.
Again, we began to investigate the spiritual side of life, and we were connected with a group called The Way. We learned how to read the Bible a little bit. We learned how the chronology of it works. So we began individually our path then. We recorded a lot of music in LA. We were actually signed to a company that Pat Boone owned, and we got a record deal down there that never really panned out all the way. After that, we went on the road, and that's where Brice's problems really became evident, and he began to drink heavily, and it stuck with him for many years. He was very close with my mother. My mother had a drinking problem too, so Brice would go over and stay with my mom for a few days, and until they got tired of each other, and she would send him back to his mom. So we've kind of been family all these years. Then I got us a record deal in around 2003 or 4. An actual record came out from a company out in Texas, and a CD of all of our old stuff. And I didn't know how Brice was at that time. He'd really been in prison. When I found him, I said, I have a surprise for you. And I took him for a ride in the truck and played him our music. And he was in tears. He was just going, we were really good, weren't we? And I said, yes. And I had some money for him and some records. And then we began to write music again. And at first he was a little conflicted about it, and I told him, I said, spiritually, actually I didn't know he was a Jehovah's Witness at first. One weekend he came to my house, we were going to record some music, and he said, well, I can't come this weekend. And I go, well, why not? He goes, well, I have to go somewhere. And I go, where are you going to go? He goes, well, I have to go to church. And I said, well, what church is that? And he goes, Jehovah's Witness. And I said, well, I'll go with you. Why don't you come to Fairfield anyway? We'll go to Temple in Fairfield. And he goes, you will? He was so expecting me to pass judgment on him, which I absolutely won't do with anyone. So we went, and it was really an interesting temple, because it was Fairfield and Vallejo, and there were some great singers in there, and we had a great time. So we began to write this music, and he was a little conflicted about it, but he wrote the most beautiful lyrics, and he always had this gift of lyricism. So I said, you will not be able to write anything that conflicts with your spirituality. It would be impossible. One of the gifts of the Holy Spirit is discernment. So you will not be able to write anything that you would not be okay with reading in temple. So I'd like to conclude talking about my dear friend with a couple of his lyrics. This first one is a song called In That Day. And this is Brice's interpretation of Genesis, basically, and the creation of man. There was a spark, there was a light, there was a splendor in the darkness of the night. There was a sigh, there was a breeze. that blew a gentle apprehension through the trees. But as the dew covered the ground, there was no ear to hear the sound. And there was wisdom behind the hand that formed some dust into the likeness of a man. And into this, the breath of life, so that the figure made of dust would see the light. Would see the light and hear the sound. And in that day, join Little Beth. So, I'm going to end this with one called In the Land of Milk and Honey. And this is Brice's song about what he found to be paradise and his expectations of that. While you were dreaming in your bed, I had a vision in my head. It seemed so silly for me to stay, so I packed up my bags and went away to the land of milk and honey, where dogs don't bite and bees don't sting. I know it sounds kind of funny, but there was plenty of everything in the land of milk and honey. Well, I had a time there, the time of my life. There was no trouble, there was no strife. It seemed so silly for me to go, but I came back so you'd know of the land of milk and honey, where the dogs don't bite and bees don't sting. I know it sounds really funny, but there's plenty of everything in the land of milk and honey. God rest Brice's soul. Thank you very much for listening.
You were dreaming in your bed. I had a vision in my head. It seemed so silly for me to stay. So I packed up my bags and went away to the land of milk and honey, where dogs don't bite and bees don't sting. I know it may sound really funny, but there was plenty of everything in a land of milk and honey. Well, I had a time there, the time of my life. There was no trouble, there was no strife. It seemed so silly for me to go. But I came back, so you know of the land of milk and honey, where dogs don't bite and bees don't sting. I know it may sound really funny, but there was plenty of everything in the land of milk and honey. I had a time, the time of my life. I know it may sound really funny, but there was plenty of everything.